like we have at least almost everybody from the registration list, so I think we're okay to go ahead and start. Welcome everybody to our inaugural Resiliency Roundtable. We're going to be talking today with Heathery Dunkerley of HSCM and Kayla Henderson of HSCM. Kayla is the hazard mitigation planner, and Heathery Dunkerley is a field representative or field coordinator. Is that the correct term?
Field representative or local liaison.
Okay.
The communities.
Local liaison. Sorry about that. So any hazard mitigation planning questions, you're talking to the right people. Want to just highlight the board members that we have here, the subcommittee members from our resiliency subcommittee: Joe Boudreau, Barbara Holstein, and Leslie Schwartz. Leslie has been working tirelessly with me to coordinate this event, so kudos to her as well. So I wanted to open it up with Heather and Kayla. If you guys could give us just a brief synopsis of your roles in the organization and how you work with the local municipalities and maybe at the local and regional level, and we can go from there.
Sure, I'll go first. So good morning, everyone. I apologize if my brain is a little scattered through this presentation. We have a lot going on with the strange weather situation we have going on tomorrow, I guess. So there's a lot of conversation kind of going on around that. So my phone might be pinging everywhere, and I have it on silent, so we should be good. But so I just want to apologize for that. But good to see everyone this morning. I am Kayla Henderson. I work for New Hampshire Homeland Security and Emergency Management. As Stephanie mentioned, I am the state hazard mitigation planner. What that means is we have 234 communities in the state of New Hampshire, all have individual plans with the exception of one. So each community should have a hazard mitigation plan. I'm going to go into that a little today in a mini presentation and kind of talk about what that means to have a hazard mitigation plan, what kind of that consists of, why they're there a little later. But basically, I work with each community to build these plans with you guys, with planners, with contractors, etc., to make sure that we meet these minimum FEMA requirements and go above them if we can. And then basically, as of 2016, I think it was, we have something called Program Administration by State. We worked very hard to get. It basically means that I do FEMA's job for a lot less money, but the good thing is I guess, and I wasn't here before this happened, so I guess when FEMA was the one reviewing the plans, which I now do, it took a year or more to do a single review. It was very kind of convoluted. It was very kind of disjointed from the communities, and luckily we've worked hard to be able to get me involved so that I can kind of go to the community meetings with you guys, and I can participate in those as we go through the planning process to make sure we're on track to meet all those FEMA requirements, ask any questions, make sure we can fill some information in there, just be a resource for you guys as planners in the community to really build a good plan. And then in the end, I now have the ability to give that formal approval, which is much quicker. So it's been really amazing. I've got some amazing feedback from planners in the communities to be able to say that it is much nicer to have someone that can kind of really understand New Hampshire, the landscape, the challenges that we have, participate in the meetings to have a better understanding, and kind of be a middle person to fight with FEMA to make sure we have everything we need and make any corrections we need, all at a much quicker pace. So that's kind of what I do, is I work with those communities and you guys to make sure we have some good hazard mitigation plans to get us some good hazard mitigation money in the future. That's me, and I'll pass it over to Heather.
Thank you, Kayla.
So good morning, Heathery Dunkerley. I work for New Hampshire Homeland Security Emergency Management. Newly assigned to this position. I have been with the agency for over 8 years. So I'm the field representative for the Rockingham County and Strafford County. I have a total of about, I don't know, what is it, 38 communities and then other state agencies. My role is really, I am the local liaison, I am the conduit kind of between the community and the state. So I act in a support role in all of their emergency management preparedness efforts, whether it's planning, exercises, drills, potential grant funding to enhance their emergency operations center. So I work one-on-one with each community that I'm assigned to, or those state agencies. And really my role is support. I support those communities in whatever they're looking to do as far as emergency management endeavors, initiatives. I support them all the way, whether, like I said, whether it's in obtaining grant funding for them, if they need any equipment for their emergency operations center. As Kayla suggested, you know, I attend local emergency plan meetings, hazard mitigation plan meetings. We've moved into COOP planning, continuity of operation planning. That's a huge, it's been a huge initiative for the past few years. Our agency will fund those plans should a community want to do that. I'm also, right now, because of our current COVID pandemic disaster that we're in, I am what's called a state program delivery manager for the FEMA public assistance side of the house. Whereas communities that have expenditures, any eligible work for this particular disaster, it all comes through me. I create the projects and grants portal. So there's a lot of moving parts to what I do. I'm also, every field rep is also assigned. We have 17 what we call EPZ communities. Those are the communities that are in the emergency planning zone around Seabrook Station nuclear power plant. So every field rep is assigned at least 2 of those communities. So also work with them in their radiological emergency preparedness. So a lot of moving parts, but again, my role is really, I'm a support, and that would be my role with you folks as well, just to support this initiative. Try to, if you're looking for, if you're looking to get more towns involved in this, that would be my role, to reach out to those communities and support you in whatever, you know, whatever you're looking to do. So that's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Heather. All right, Kayla, did you want to jump in with your presentation?
Sure, let's see here. All right. Everybody see the hazard mitigation title screen? Okay, looks good, looks good.
Yes.
Awesome. All right, so as I kind of mentioned earlier, what I'm going to do is just going to give a high level, the best I can high level. I'm sorry, I'm a details gal, so if I get too in the weeds, I apologize. I'm going to try and go for anyone who isn't familiar with hazard mitigation plans as well. So I'm sorry if I repeat it for those that are more familiar, but I just want to make sure I kind of cover those bases as well. But so as I mentioned, I am the State Hazard Mitigation Planner. I've been a planner with HSEM since 2016. I've worked with them a year prior doing some other kind of things, but I've really, really loved hazard mitigation, working with the communities, working with you guys. So I'm kind of excited to share this with you for those that aren't familiar. Let's jump in here. And feel free for me, if you have questions as you go through, feel free to chime in, ask questions then. You can hold them to the end, we can answer them then. Whatever works for you guys, I'm pretty open to that. All right, so number one, so what is mitigation? So we kind of have a quote here from FEMA of what it exactly is. I like to kind of use a really good example that somebody gave me a while ago when I was struggling with this. So a lot of times, because as Heather mentioned, one of her thousands of duties on her regular job, nonetheless, the COVID stuff and everything else we do, is there's so many different types of plans. And she mentioned the COOP plan for continuity of operation. She mentioned the emergency operations plan. There's so many different types. We have mitigation plans. So for mitigation, it a lot of times gets kind of intermingled with the emergency operations plans that you guys might work on, which is more response kind of activities. Mitigation is really meant to address problems at the root, to stop them before they become a problem that we now need to have an emergency operation plan that addresses the response to those things. So someone a while back gave me an example of what mitigation was, saying, preparedness might be, or response might be sending out an electronic message sign to a road that's closed because it's flooded. That's something that's more of a response thing that we need to prepare for as well. But what mitigation really is for doing something a little bigger, probably more costly, more time consuming, something like raising that road up so that it never floods to begin with. We never have to send that sign out there to be a response effort. So mitigation is really kind of getting to the root of the problem, fixing it so that there's not a problem going forward. And then we are 100% covered, the dream one day. And that's really what mitigation is, and kind of the difference between response preparedness and what mitigation should be doing. So again, this is kind of just another high level to show that. I know I'm very biased as the mitigation planner, but mitigation to me is always step one, to really make sure we understand what those risks and hazards are so that we can look to find a root of the problem. And until we get there and can fix that, we have prevention, we have preparedness, we have response to that. And of course, we have recovery when things go wrong. And like Heather mentioned, when we're responding to disasters that have happened that have really cost us money, time, resources, etc. So mitigation just being that step one. And I lost my mouse. There it is. All right. So why do we mitigate? Besides the obvious of fixing those problems that we have, it saves us a lot of money. The thing is it's tricky to see because, like I mentioned, sometimes it costs a lot more money up front, or it takes a lot of time to do. But here's just a few quick references that it actually has been proven to save us a lot of money. So overall, it's been about every dollar spent on hazard mitigation will save someone $6 in future. So again, we're talking about staff time to respond. We're talking about resources it takes, wear and tear, all sorts of things that ends up costing us in the end. So it might be inexpensive and never up front, but it actually saves us a lot of money. And that's for every dollar. So if you imagine, especially with things getting so expensive in today's life, that is a lot of money. And I put the table in here at the top because they've kind of gone even deeper and really found out that there are some things that you save even more money on. So if we're looking at hurricane stuff, you'll see there's a 7-to-1, there's an 8-to-1, there's even a 12-to-1 for earthquake, because for those areas that have those really severe problems, yeah, that can save a heck of a lot of money just doing some small little things to make that more resilient. So just wanted to show that money is always a huge factor in everybody's decision. It's hard to see those numbers to fix things, but even harder if you look back and you look at how much money you spent responding to that 7, 8, 9 times versus what you paid once to never have to do that again. All right, so again, we quickly talked about state and local plans. So one of the big things about these plans is you need to have the community. The community needs to have a hazard mitigation plan that is active. They expire every 5 years. Basically, FEMA says we're going to help you get some money for mitigation projects if you have one of these plans. The deal is you have to make sure that your information and what we're looking at and why you want to use this money is as current as we want it to be. So I think it used to be 3 years, and they relaxed a little and said, you know what, there's a lot going on, but let's do every 5 years, give you guys a break with all the other plans you have. So basically say, hey, if you have an active, approved FEMA/Kayla at HCM, a mitigation plan, we're going to give you access to some of our FEMA mitigation funding to help you do some of these projects. So when it expires, you don't have to update it. We highly encourage it because it does give you access to this money. But when you, but basically, if it expires and something happens or there's a big project that you want to do and it's mitigation, and like I said, it's usually more money, it takes a longer time to do these types of projects, FEMA's going to say you're going to have to look elsewhere, do it yourself or something. So, and I'll get a little further into why this mitigation money has a little extra incentive too. But that's kind of huge for communities. And I'll show you that luckily in New Hampshire and nationwide, we're doing really well on those that have active mitigation plans. So luckily, this isn't really too much of an issue of being able to get them some access to the money. Just kind of another quick graph to show, I'm sure we all know, if not actively in the back of our heads, or again, looking at potentially tonight and tomorrow's weather, the weather is not getting any nicer to us. Mother Nature is pretty harsh. So this is just a really kind of long view of how those have impacted us. This is nationwide in the United States. But if you look at that number at the top, it says $1 billion disaster, not million. It is a very costly event, as we mentioned. We look back and it's like, okay, that looks not great. But if you look to 2020, 2021, and they're still putting in obviously numbers for 2021, but it is getting worse, and it is in all areas. So we see a lot of severe storms. We see the yellow, the tropical storms. We're just seeing all kinds of things. And of course, now we have the pandemic. There's just a lot going on, and it's not getting any easier. So just kind of a quick view at that. I love data. I'm a big data nerd. Here's just, went too quick, a little quick copy there. There we go. Here's just a few quick examples. Again, we have tons, unfortunately, but we're working on it. So here are just some quick examples of what it looks like for New Hampshire when we talk about what these impacts are. So we have some along the seacoast. We have some inland. A lot of times I've seen a culvert go from, horizontal to vertical. I've seen, I think, Heather personally stand in a huge gaping hole way above her, just from water. We see a lot of damages in New Hampshire, and we think, oh, it's a small state. We're certainly not immune. I was actually talking with a community yesterday in New Hampshire. It was a while ago, but they said, I think they're the only community in New Hampshire that has had an active volcano. It's way back in the 1600s, thank goodness. But we do have them here. And that is not typically a problem for us in New England, but we do still have plenty of problems with the weather kind of beating us up. So I just chose a few from the seacoast. That being a huge project that's being worked on very long term for the seacoast, and some hurricane things that we've dealt with, or tropical cyclone things that we've dealt with. So we definitely are seeing these impacts. It's easy to say, yeah, the weather's getting bad, it's not getting any better. But when you start seeing the actual pictures, if you can kind of see, I don't know if you can see my mouse on here, but if you go look at the top right, you see the culvert, and then one to the left, you kind of see someone in the safety jacket and the gentleman in front of him. If you look behind him at that house, that is a porch hanging over a cliff. Certainly not a situation I would want to be in. I know we like a riverside view, but that might be a little too far. So it can really creep up and be scary in a lot of different ways. Instead of just seeing, roads being impacted, houses can be impacted. There's some scary stuff can happen. So just a quick view of that. Again, I'm just going to quickly touch, and this is an old, you'll see it's 2016. My purpose for this, I couldn't find an updated one for some reason, but it really hasn't changed. And my purpose for this is just kind of showing those grants I'm going to talk about in a minute and how important they are. So we have three things, three really big funding opportunities, and they updated the top one that says 4%. Pre-disaster mitigation is now called BRIC, and I'll mention that quickly later. It's just really a title change and not too much different. But this is one of the grants that someone with a mitigation plan has access to. And we usually, for New Hampshire, we pretty much fund the actual planning updates, or that's probably what you guys are familiar with too. We either grant it to the community or to the planners to help update these plans. That comes out of this PDM, or pre-disaster mitigation program, and now the BRIC program, but it's a small portion. Then we have our flood mitigation. That is a part of the grant funding you get access to. It's a little higher. Again, it doesn't matter where you are in the country, in the world, really. Flooding is a problem everywhere. So we actually don't get tons in New Hampshire to apply for this grant, and I would love to see that more. So we're trying to kind of incentivize and help those access this fund a little more as well. And at the bottom, you see there's something we have called the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, or HMGP. This is the most widely used grant. This is the most widely used in New Hampshire as well. It's hugely beneficial. This is typically the money that we pull from to really get those projects done in New Hampshire. And again, I think I'll cover it later, and I apologize, but that PDM, that 4% that you see at the top, that is nationally competitive money. So harder to access. When we have things like Hurricane Harvey, et cetera, we're competing in New Hampshire to say we need to fix this, which is very important to us. But Texas is saying, okay, but come on. So it's a little more competitive, a little harder to access that. That HMGP that has the higher number, that's statewide competitive. So that makes us able to use that money in our own state and split it up how it works best. So it's really great and important to have that access to that kind of money, and it can really make a difference. And you can see it's 8.4 million, really. It's more than that, 804 million. I think it's probably more than that these days. So a lot of money can come out of this if you have this mitigation plan and talk about the things you need to get access So I talked a lot about the communities having these plans. The state, if you're unaware, also has a plan. So in 2018 was the last time we updated the state plan, but FEMA holds us accountable as well. So for us to be able to give the communities money, we have to do the same thing and be a good role model and have our own state mitigation plan. So we do, and we update it every 5 years the same way. And this gives everyone access to, oh gosh, what am I, PA money, public assistance money. So use of the acronyms and some other things too. So we do our own plan, same exact process, a few extra things that we do, but every 5 years we update it. And it's kind of like a starting document for all the communities to take a look at, basically say, this is what the state of New Hampshire is dealing with. And now when you go through your community process, you can kind of pick and choose what's really important for you and impact your community and really kind of make it more specific to them. So in 2018, this is just a quick look. We always go through and we reanalyze kind of what threats overall to New Hampshire are. I don't want to say that we are total psychics and it's kind of a bittersweet thing, but when we first came out with this, if you look in here, we added infectious diseases, which was a little bit of a controversial topic at the time. And people were wondering why we added that as a natural hazard. Now here we have COVID, unfortunately, and it's kind of like, okay, that makes sense. So we do our best to try and to really understand. We work with all of the New Hampshire agencies, as many people as we can. We work with you. We always invite you guys out to it as well. We try to make sure we get as many people involved as possible to really have the most subject matter experts we can to get a good statewide view and predict these things. So solar storms and space weather was another weird one that we added that people were confused about. So just fingers crossed, we don't have any issues with that. We don't want to be the state that is the psychic that brings all the bad stuff. So great to hear that now those conversations are happening in the state plans, but basically we just asked for the communities to look at whatever the hazards are for the state of New Hampshire, all of these, and then they're able to pick and choose which ones are important to them. And they can actually omit any that they don't feel apply to them as well. So if you don't feel solar, if you don't feel like you want to talk about infectious diseases, you don't have to, but this is kind of the starting point, the plan in general, and looking at the hazards that the state identifies every 5 years. And I just kind of wanted to, I'll go quickly through this. I just kind of want to pull out one example of a hazard that we talk about. So one that's a little less popular, and again, at the time, I think when I first made this presentation, and I kind of just edited it a little bit, COVID was not around, and we hadn't, infectious diseases wasn't the big conversation that it is now. But earthquake is one that I think gets forgotten a lot. And again, just to show the importance that we make sure we go through and we talk about as many hazards as we can with these communities, because you just never know, infectious disease being a good example. But earthquakes, so a lot of times I have conversations with communities about earthquakes and they laugh and they go, we really don't have those. Sometimes we feel them, they're in Maine. I've heard we have a medium fault line, something like that. And I just like to every once in a while kind of do a reminder with everybody to say, again, we are not immune from these kind of things. If you actually look at the data and stuff like this, if you look at the map on the left, we're actually in yellow, which is a mid-range for expected number of occurrences of damaging earthquakes. I'll just put that little note in there. And it does say over 10,000 years. So yes, it is a huge gap, but I'll get to that. So if you kind of look at the top right, again, we're kind of in there and you're like, number of earthquakes felt, okay, 320. That's not the 3 that I thought I remember. And then if you look down below at the last one in the corner, bottom right, it shows all those little mini ones that we have. So a lot of times people think, oh, look at California in red. They get hammered all the time with really big earthquakes, and they do. But they have very different soil than we do, so it's felt a little different. And we have a lot of little ones, which sometimes can get forgotten. And New England in general is pretty historic, and we have a lot of underground infrastructure that isn't necessarily up to date. I've been in communities that still have main water lines that are wooden. So those little quakes can add up and can cause some damage. But just a quick example to say, the need is definitely out there, and to make sure we really talk about all the hazards, because you never really know. And again, here's just a little more on that. If you look at the United States one below, it just kind of goes to show the differences in the East Coast versus the West Coast when we talk about that California one versus the New England one. California has really harsh ones, but again, with their type of soil, the clay, it's more specific where it's felt. it hurts more, but it's much more specific. Where on the East Coast, we have that granite, we have that really hard bedrock that we felt earthquakes that happen in South Carolina up here. We've had chimneys fall from what seems like nothing, but it's an earthquake happening down in South Carolina. So again, just a kind of reminder, you never know. We have tons of old historic buildings, brick buildings, schools that are brick a lot. Just a reminder to, always make sure to work through the communities, each of those things, and really dig down, because it's easy to get kind of caught up in everything being so easy to say, oh, we don't really see that. We call that disaster fatigue. And then when it happens, we're like, oh, I guess that could be a problem. So we try to fix that so that we never even see it. This is just a really high level overview of what we do for the planning process in general that you guys go through, or some of you go through with me as we meet with the communities. So we basically are just kind of organizing the planning process, what we're going to do. The big thing kind of being we assess those risks for the community. Most of the time we look back just at least the past 5 years. And we say, all right, what kind of risks have we seen for each hazard? We document that. We create a mitigation strategy to say, all right, so we've had these impacts. What can we do to fix that so we don't have them going forward? And then we work with the community to adopt that. And then I give the formal approval, and then that plan is all set for the next 5 years. And we hope to see those actions they come up with be successful. I'm just going to read, and I hate reading off slides, so I apologize, but I really, really love this quote from former FEMA Administrator Brock Long. He said, much of what happens in a disaster is predetermined by years of decisions that preceded the storm or earthquake, decisions about what to build, where to build it, and how to maintain it. So this is huge, basically just saying it's so hard to see it, but when you really look at what makes the difference, it's doing it right and doing it right the first time. So I really think that's really important to mitigation. I really like the quote, and it just says, again, mitigation really should be step one, and let's be honest with ourselves about our vulnerabilities and what we can do and really work to build it better. Don't forget we have these brick buildings, and be able to say, you know what, if we put these little things in there, we're going to be much more resilient. So, I just put this in there again, it's just my own opinion on it. But again, the biggest thing with these plans that we go through is really assessing those risks and making sure we talk about those hazards and be real and dig as much as we can with those road agents or whoever's at those communities that really know those risks to say, let's be honest and say, has this happened? When did it happen? How badly did it hurt? It can really get easy to get caught in that same kind of, not disaster fatigue, but almost it's so normal to us, we don't see it thing. I've also been in conversations with communities where they say, oh yeah, that road floods, but it floods every year. We deal with it. It's kind of the other side of it, and we don't want that either. So that's basically saying, okay, let's make sure we record that. And if we happen to notice in the last 4 plan updates, this same road floods, I think we might want to fix it for you. So same kind of thing as disaster fatigue. Sometimes it can seem so normal, and we just deal with it. In New Hampshire, we're very hardy people, and we don't want to have to deal with it. We want to be able to take long vacations and not worry about that. So we've had it rough enough up here. I hate the cold, so why deal with anything else? So yeah, just kind of that. And then of course, looking at what those things can be to fix that. So even though dreaming a little big, try to push them to dream a little big on that stuff too. It's easy to get also caught into the, I guess we can just fix a culvert over there. Maybe that'll help. But as I mentioned before, if you raise that whole road, it might take longer. It might be a longer process to go and set that up. It's more expensive, but that's going to be what really might solve your problem. So I always encourage and hope you guys do as well, to really think big on those things as well, so that we can either break it into phases or we can work with you and figure something out. But let's find out what really the problem is, and let's really find some good solutions to get there and fix it. So this is what I was kind of talking about earlier. I'm very excited about for nationwide, especially New Hampshire, you'll see in a second. This is the percentage that have current mitigation plans. So it's always fluctuating, of course, as things expire and people are working on it. But you can just show that how hugely important it is that we have these and have these plans ready. And nationwide, it is important and it makes a huge difference. And in New Hampshire, it does as well. So this is the most current one. The red ones will you see are those that are expired. And again, this is normal. It's not anyone doing anything wrong. It's just they're probably in the planning process right now to update those. But we try to have New Hampshire as covered as possible so that we can access that money and make sure that they're aware of any hazards that they're facing. So I think we're doing a pretty good job, and I'd love to see 100% one day. We have some issues with FEMA funding being a little bit of a deterrent on that, but we'll see what it can do. I'll bug them. And then I kind of mentioned these are the three big funding opportunities that you get access to that we like to push as that second part. So the plan really being the mechanism that recognizes those historical damages and impacts, and then the mitigation actions to hopefully fix those. And we want to fix those if we can with these three programs, these funding opportunities to help get the money to do that. So that's that building resistant infrastructure in communities is the new PDM or pre-disaster. Like I said, they just changed the scope a little bit, not very much, and then basically gave it a new name, honestly. And then we have that hazard mitigation grant program that was at 84% that we try to pull from as much as possible. That's state competitive, and that flood mitigation that we hope to use a little more than we do now, because again, it's certainly something we could utilize. I'll go quickly through this, just kind of high level. The only thing is the HMGP, the private nonprofits, can have access to that bucket, whereas the BRIC or the flood mitigation is specifically to governments, tribes that we don't have in New Hampshire, and state agencies. So HMGP can help with private nonprofits at this time. I kind of went over this, so I'll go real high level to it. Again, I talk a lot, so I apologize. But big thing here I'll put, I kind of already covered this, it is New Hampshire only competitive, and the cost share I haven't mentioned yet is 75-25. So some other grants that we have access to at HSEM, like EMPG or Emergency Management Performance Grants, is a 50-50. So mitigation is a 75-25. 75 is what is going to be reimbursed. That's the federal portion, and the 25 is the cost share for the community. So we're actually able to give you a little more money covered through these mitigation to help with that being a more expensive project potentially as well. So it's great to be able to say, hey, if you access this money for mitigation, it's also going to cost you a little less money in the end to do these projects as well, hopefully, compared to some other ones at least. Let's see, I just want to show you a few, hopefully you guys know about it. We actually have a mitigation success story portion on our HSEM resource page if you want to take a closer look. But here are some eligible activities you can do under this grant. We've worked with Barrington, New Hampshire on a few things, but just an example of one of those projects that access this funding. We had an underside culvert that was causing a problem, and it is a problem no more. And they were able to use that HMGP money, and that really made a difference, and we're happy to have that. And they're continuing to apply for other ones. So a lot of times I hear from communities too, if they've applied for one of these funding grants before, it incentivizes them to do it again. Once you've been through it, nobody likes to do all the FEMA federal paperwork, but once you've been through it and you realize, oh, okay, I know the process, it's not so bad. Luckily, we see some repeat applicants. So if someone's done it before in a community, I would certainly encourage them to continue applying. If they haven't, let them know that once you go through it once, other communities say it's much easier after that once you kind of get a flow of it too. This is again just that BRIC / pre-disaster mitigation where we pull that plan update funding from. Typically, we get it every year. The only thing I will mention for the BRIC program now is they're adding a cap. We used to be able to get a certain amount and then kind of distribute it how we could so that we could cover all the plans that were coming up in a year that needed to be updated. They've changed it recently so that we only get so much and not all of them are able to be covered. So we're working through that process. So if you end up with a community that can't be covered, you'll probably hear from me and maybe Heather going forward on those to try and figure something out with that. But I'll just let you know that quick plug that we're seeing is one of the changes we're seeing, that if it can't be covered, we might have to cover it under something else. But if we are able to, fingers crossed, and know it is a nationwide problem, absolutely everyone in every state in mitigation is arguing and yelling at FEMA about this cap. So I'm hoping they change it. But right now it stays that same 75-25 share. So that is good as well. Again, eligible activities on there, just kind of compared to that HMGP, there's a few less in there, but plenty still covered for sure. And I'll send you guys this PowerPoint after so you can kind of dig in deeper if you want. And again, that flooding mitigation that we hope to use much more. You have to be insured by the NFIP to have access to this. They're the ones that give us this. It's funded annually, so that's why we try to use it up every year as much as we can. And then of course the cost matching varies. So there are a few extra specialties with this grant funding but we can always, Heather and I can work with you on that to figure that out. And again, I would certainly try to see if we can incentivize some communities to just take a look. It's just another avenue to get them funding as we get more limited with what FEMA is willing to share with us, et cetera, for funding. And again, just kind of a quick eligibility on there. An example of a house being elevated in Londonderry. Again, one of those things that you're like, what? That seems crazy. But when you do it, it makes a heck of a difference. And it's really important. So very excited to see that. We've also seen some acquisitions. Plymouth has a lot of flooding around their rivers. So we're working with them on, sometimes it's easier to just buy out a property and do that too. So there's plenty of things that we can do to help with this stuff. And flooding, again, always a problem. And then I know that you guys are resiliency subcommittee as well. So I just wanted to quickly touch on the resiliency portion. So I talked about mitigation, and that's its own kind of thing. Resiliency is new to us, new to the state, new to a discussion. It's not anything that we currently have funding specifically for, but we have seen it start to be a conversation nationwide within the state even. So I just want to touch upon it a little bit and what that future may look like. So Nashua and New Hampshire completed their first kind of what I'll call a hybrid hazard mitigation and resiliency plan. And I put the link in here if you want to take a look. But it was a huge, huge process. They had to access a few different funding mechanisms to do it. Mitigation would only fund the mitigation portion. I think EPA helped with some of the resiliency things, but basically it's an amazing discussion, and part of that response, preparedness, prevention discussion that we have to have with everyone. And mitigation only covers so much. And even with FEMA, with the requirements that we go through, to be honest, if we just checked off those FEMA boxes, we could have a one-page plan that was absolutely useless. But that's not what we really want for our communities. We want something that's useful and going to be beneficial for them, especially easier going forward if we can as well. So we encourage them to talk about things beyond those FEMA requirements, those bare bone basics. And I've brought it up before, but actually a lot of communities have said they're already talking about it on their own, is adding in resiliency to that. Mitigation doesn't talk about how businesses in the community are really impacted, private residents, businesses, downtown. COVID, again, is another great example that we've seen with that. We weren't expecting that, a week or two of everybody kind of shutting down can really take a small business out for the rest of the community's life. So that's stuff that's really not covered or FEMA is looking to do with these mitigation plans, but certainly something that we should be talking about. It could be in the hazard mitigation plan, it could be in the emergency operations plan, in the continuity of operations plan. There's plenty of places we can put that, but it's not currently required for this mitigation plan. And we've only seen one community really pursue it, but definitely something we're looking to increase and do as well for the state plan in the future. So we're trying to work that in. But I put a little note at my last bullet here is we just a few weeks ago got in a conversation with the Nature Conservancy on a potential pilot program that they have to work with communities on talking about resiliency in addition to mitigation at the same time, to kind of pair those together because it does naturally kind of fit well. So it's in the works. We're talking about it. We're trying to figure out funding. We're trying to figure out who. They're just trying to look at communities they may try to pilot the program on to see if it's helpful. But they were kind of talking about maybe offering some sort of educational conference, program, seminar, something to talk about resiliency and how we can add that into some of these other plans. So just want to put a plug. It is being talked about. It's nothing that we currently have funding for or add into our plan as a necessity, but it is a conversation. It is a buzzword. It is coming up, and hopefully we're seeing some stuff in the future. So I wish I could tell you more about that, but that's kind of all I got on the specific resiliency portion. And some other states too are working on it as well. So we're really good in small New England to be able to chat with one another. Massachusetts is a great example. They work a lot with climate adaptation in their last state plan update. And I think they talk a little bit about resiliency too. So we're trying to all kind of upgrade all of our things to really cover as much as we can. Maybe even one day eliminate having 7 plans and have just one big master plan. But that's what I got on that. And then here, just some quick things. I can send you the link to our resource page if you haven't seen it. If you don't have it, I'll give it to you in a second, actually. My email, my phone number. I have access to tons of FEMA resources, state resources. Heather and I both work with the other state departments all the time. So if there's a question that maybe we don't know, but you know, resources, natural resources we might reach out to them, etc. So definitely her and I are both amazing resources. We work with FEMA, we steal their resources. We work with all the communities, we can steal their resources. They let us, I guess that's not far, right? So definitely reach out to her and I, and we can get you whatever you need. If you're not sure how the planning process works, if you're not sure about the grant process, anything, we're involved in so many different things that we can, if we don't have the answer, we can find someone who can for you. So know that we are a resource for the communities, we are a resource for you. We're just trying to make New Hampshire a better place. And then I just want to wrap. She's not here. Today is literally her last day, and I think she's scrambling to wrap everything up as well as she can for us. So we also have a state hazard mitigation. Oh, I put planner, my bad. There's not double me, there's one me, and then the vacant spot is the state hazard mitigation officer. So I always say we're two sides of a coin. So I really work mostly with approving and reviewing those plans and working with the communities on that. And the mitigation officer works with the grant side a little more, make sure we get that funding from FEMA every year, make sure we can get those projects through for those communities, etc. And today, like I mentioned, Megan Wells, if you don't know her, is her last day as the officer. She's moving to FEMA Region 1, so hopefully we still see her. She's going to be working with a public assistance branch, but I'm losing that half of my coin, so hopefully we're going to have that filled soon. But she is also usually, or someone, not she or he, the officer is involved in mitigation planning as well. And we really work well together as a duo to make sure we have those plans mix well with the grants and vice versa, so that it all cooperates and works very well together. So, and of course, whoever your field representative is, Heather is amazing. Heather's actually had experience working with mitigation in the past as well. So let us know what you need, and we're there for you guys. That's what I got. And then I think I've been avoiding this flashing chat on the side. So let me see what you guys got right here.
Thank you so much, Kayla. So we're moving into our first discussion time. So if we could just go around and have everybody do a brief introduction, your name, if you are representing a municipality or an organization, and where you live, that would be great. So Joe, do you mind kicking it off?
Yeah, I'm Joe Boudreau. I'm a commissioner representing Rochester to SRPC.
Awesome, thank you. Barb?
Hi, Barb Holstein. I'm a commissioner representing Rochester.
Awesome. Teresa Walker?
Hi, everybody. I'm Teresa Walker. I actually joined this webinar wearing a different hat, which is the Regional Economic Development Center in Raymond, which is an economic development agency that serves Rockingham and part of Hillsborough County. And I joined because I'm curious, Kayla, about how COVID and COVID resiliency planning will dovetail with local hazard mitigation plans. I say that because there's a lot of money coming into economic development agencies for resiliency planning. And for a long time, as some folks know, I also work for Rockingham Planning Commission. I've been the primary staff person doing the hazard mitigation plans there since the local hazard mitigation planning started. And I feel like the COVID pandemic really very quickly jived these two different planning things, economic development and hazard mitigation. And so for many, infectious disease has not been on any municipality's list of hazards to address in their plan. And as Kayla referenced, kind of like earthquakes, they kind of would laugh at me when I raised it. So I'm updating Raymond's plan now and Sandowns. And of course, the first thing they want to do is add infectious disease. And they seeing it as an economic development hazard more than a infrastructure hazard. So I know there's no way to answer that question today, but it's just going to be interesting going forward, looking at how economic development planning and hazard mitigation planning come together at the local level.
Thank you, Teresa. And maybe we can cycle back to that right after we finish introductions, because I think that's a good point and a good discussion point. Colin?
Hi there, Colin Lentz. I work at Stratford Regional Planning Commission with the other folks on the call, and the transportation planner. And I live in Rochester.
Thank you. Stephen?
I'm Stephen Geis, the Stratford Regional Planning Commission. I live in Dover, New Hampshire, and I'm on the call today because I'm doing Somersworth's hazard mitigation plan. So Kayla, I will be working with you very soon. So.
Awesome. Julian?
Julie Long, I'm Community Development Coordinator for the City of Rochester. I also live in Rochester, and we're required to include natural hazard mitigation in our community development block grant program and planning.
Great. Steve Diamond? Oh, Steve, we can't hear you. We'll come back to you, Steve. Leslie?
Hi, I'm Leslie Schwartz. I'm a commissioner with Stratford Regional Planning Commission from Durham and one of the co-founders of this resiliency subcommittee.
Awesome. Kimberly?
Yes, I'm Kimberly Reed. I'm the planner, planning and zoning administrator for the town of Rye. I also have a dual hat that I am the emergency management assistant to the administrator. And I too, like Teresa, joined this. I know that I'm in Rockingham planning, but I've worked with Teresa on a couple of different hazard mitigation plans, and ours is up for renewal this coming December. And I'm just really curious as to how this COVID and is going to interplay into the hazard mitigation plan moving forward. So I was just curious. So that's why I wanted to join in today.
Awesome. Thank you. Jen?
Good morning, Jen Sis, Director at Stratford Regional Planning Commission. Just really excited to have you all here. And for Kim and for Teresa, I'll say, and if I'm speaking perhaps a little bit on behalf of our resiliency subcommittee, I think the pandemic is part of what precipitated the formation of the resiliency subcommittee and having some larger conversations about how we as a region can become more resilient. And so the subcommittee has been breaking down and looking at what are the different aspects of resiliency that we need to be talking about. So thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Catherine?
Hi, I'm Kathy Duderstadt, and I'm a citizen of Durham. And so that's what brings me here. But I'm also an atmospheric and space science scientist at UNH. So very interested in how our regional climate is changing, as well as I work on some solar storms and space weather. So going back to what Kayla was talking about.
Awesome. Thank you. Lindsay?
Catherine gets it.
Hi, everyone. Lindsay Williams. I'm a commissioner on Stratford Regional Planning, and I serve on City Council in Dover. And then my other hat is I also teach at UNH around coastal management issues. So I'm mostly here to just continue to listen and learn and think about how all of those pieces intersect and how we build resilient communities.
Thank you. Jackson?
Hi everyone, Jackson Rand. I am the GIS planner with Stratford Regional Planning Commission. I live in Concord and I'm here to learn more about resiliency and hazard mitigation.
Great, thank you. Steve, are you up and running? No? Okay. Steve Diamond, he is also on the resiliency subcommittee and he represents Barrington. All right, so can we circle back real quick? We have probably 5 to 7 minutes of some quick discussion before I want to get into Heather's portion, and then we can come back and have a longer discussion if time allows.
Yeah, so do you want me to circle back to Teresa and
I am going to have to step off at this time. I apologize. And I really didn't have anything else to present. I really had nothing to present. I just wanted to let you know my role with the local communities. So unfortunately, I do have to get off this call.
Okay. So Heather, maybe before you run away, like one parting thing for the folks that are here is that if a community is looking for more information and they're looking to engage with folks from HSEM, should they reach out to you? Go to Heather?
So absolutely. So I've already, we reach out to them individually. They are aware that I am their field rep, and if there are any needs that they have, they can most certainly reach out to me directly. I have all of their contact information.
Okay.
It's my responsibility to ensure that that information is up to date. So I actually was just in Barrington 2 days ago. So looking for other funding sources for their emergency operations center. They're building a new town hall, and so that's really what more of what my role is, just kind of to be there for the communities. And they absolutely have my contact information, and yes, can certainly reach out to me directly. Thank you for having me. I apologize.
Thank you, Heather.
Stay on. All right, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Thanks for your time. All right, in that case, we can discuss away. All right, Kayla, if you wanted to start with Teresa's questions and points, I think that's a good
Sure.
place to start.
I will do my best to address this. So I'm sure it's not too surprising, but we're still working through the whole COVID stuff and figuring out what that means in all kind of aspects for mitigation, for response, for recovery, for public health in general. It is such a huge topic. So we just kind of, like everyone else, had to kind of figure out how to roll with it as we go. So I'm sure you guys are familiar, the planners working with the communities. A lot of times everyone was meeting in person for these hazard mitigation meetings to make and update the plans, where we had to have a quick discussion with FEMA when COVID came around, how do we even adjust for documenting those meetings for match, et cetera. And they had to kind of rapidly figure that out. So they're still working through just us being able to do mitigation as a process. And we've finally gotten a little bit of a ways with that and some leniencies with a few things with that. But they haven't quite figured out how that's going to mix with mitigation yet. And to be honest, there's kind of a weird discrepancy with mitigation planning at the federal level and mitigation grants at the federal level. And my best way to describe this is FEMA planning understands mitigation in general and what is mitigation. So any project we will say, hey, is this mitigation? Is raising a road mitigation? Yes. Is trimming trees sometimes mitigation because they're constantly regrowing and something that's a problem for power lines, etc. Yes. But when we start talking about what they're willing to fund with their mitigation money, it's a little bit different. They're much more pickier and it doesn't always align. So we're already kind of seeing that as a problem. And I'm sure COVID is going to make that even messier. So I know like generators is something that's very useful and we fund it through our emergency performance grant right now. But mitigation, basically FEMA mitigation says, that's not really for us. That's something that's more of a response. And really it's all very much a gray area and it overlaps. And so there's just some of those discrepancies with mitigation and the funding allowed for that now. So I think COVID's going to make that even trickier. And I know that there's constant discussions going on with, again, the federal health system, the state health system, to try and figure out how we can work better together. My best example outside of COVID, because infectious diseases is much more than that. And when we added it, again, we honestly didn't predict COVID. We were talking a little bit more about Lyme disease, Triple E, Zika, some of the other things we were seeing come back a little more from a natural sense. And that's actually why we added it as a natural hazard, is with those kind of climate fluctuations, we were seeing ticks hang around longer. We were seeing mosquitoes come up sooner. We were seeing rare birds, animals, everything come up because it was warmer. Just a lot of different kind of climate things that were impacting these diseases coming around. So before that, we were talking a little more about those things. And again, a lot of it is working with public health and some avenues that they have more than us with mitigation. So it was already kind of a struggle before, and now with COVID, I think it just complicates it even more, but it's certainly typically more of a public health thing, certainly something we want to discuss in these plans still, because it is a problem. We're kind of been arguing with FEMA a little bit over kind of having supplies for public health issues and if that can qualify as mitigation. So it's definitely in discussion and what that's going to mean for counting it as mitigation, what they're going to allow for their grant funding, or where they're going to lead us to go and look. But it's in process. We have some other things we're working out too outside of COVID for infectious disease, but it's brand new for mitigation planning in New Hampshire, and we're working through it. So I wish I had more info than that, but no, it's in discussion, and I'll let you guys know when I know more.
I just, there is a lot of money available through EDA, through economic development, for pandemic response. And so I think there might be a way for municipalities or agencies to use EDA money to draft an action plan for infectious disease that can be put into the hazard mitigation plan, right? Because the economic disruption over this has been so long-term, things that we normally don't talk about in the hazard mitigation plans. We're usually talking about 2 or 3 or 5 day disruptions through ice storms or whatever. So I don't know, I just was thinking outside the box a little bit, that not necessarily your responsibility, Kayla, but for those of us who are drafting the plans, there may be other pools of money we can use for the local plan that helps fund addressing some of these broader pandemic things.
I'm thinking long-term, Teresa, because in order to have a hazard mitigation plan, so we're currently in the pandemic. So we're thinking pandemic right now, we're thinking how to fund these things. But long-term, you have to have that disaster, whether it's sea level rise, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's a hurricane, it has to be in your plan in order to get federal money, FEMA money. So I'm also, I love the short term, but I'm also thinking of it long term, because if it's not in your plan, don't even apply for that grant because you won't get it. So I'm looking at it from a different perspective and curious how we can weave it in for the long term as well.
And Kimberly, just to hitchhike on that a bit, what we're trying to do from our perspective in the resiliency subcommittee is we're trying to look at it. If there's a drought, what are the implications economically? What are the implications food security wise? What are the implications in terms of, the community in general? And that takes into account economic development, et cetera. So we're trying to make it a little broader, if I may, that says mitigation is good, but we have all these other factors that we really need to be thinking about in a more holistic way.
I like that. Thank you.
So I think my thought is related to that, Joe. I'm in the transportation program at SRPC, and we're looking at doing some work with our municipalities along the resilience lines over the next 2 years. And the big thing for me that I'm sure everyone's thought about is none of these things care about borders. Yet New Hampshire is very focused on local governance and stuff, which is great, but related to the funding thing, all of these communities rely on infrastructure that also crosses borders. And so it seems like any mitigation as well as adaptation kind of planning will require not only cooperation and collaboration, but also sharing that cost. So I guess my question is, each of these municipalities has a mitigation plan, their own mitigation plan that they're required to have, but is there that kind of collaboration and cost sharing going on for, evacuation routes or whatever it is? That's kind of what I've been thinking along the lines coming up for the next 2 years, is getting groups of municipalities together by watershed or what have you, where multiple communities are going to share in the cost one way or another. So are communities planning for that is my question. How is that happening?
Yeah, so I'll speak to kind of both the local and the larger level like you did, Colin. So at the local level, we have something, FEMA just came around, if you guys aren't familiar with it, it's called a High Hazard Dam Grant Program. Mm-hmm. It's a brand new funding that they just came out with 2 years ago. And there are times FEMA is great, and there are times FEMA is not so great. And one of the things not so great that FEMA tends to do is they kind of just launch these things out of nowhere, half baked, and they're like, go with it, we're excited, and it's not fully fleshed out. So this is what happened with this. And they came out with it and they said, all right, you have 30 days to get applicants in the state of New Hampshire. And we said, okay, that's short, but what do we, you know, what do they need to do to get access to this? And they said, we haven't quite figured it out yet. So we had to rapidly try and get these communities involved in something we didn't totally understand, and they were slowly giving us information on it. And one of the things that finally came out was, hey, in order to have access to this brand new grant that's never been seen before, they have to have a mitigation action in their mitigation plan specifically addressing whatever has a high hazard dam they're going to apply for. This has never been something that was needed in the past. And so nobody had it. Nobody was talking about dams unless they needed to. So FEMA came out with something saying, well, they better have it in there or they're going to have to put it in there. So this was one of kind of those discrepancies that came out, and we had to rapidly add it in. The reason I bring this up is because we've kind of learned something from this, is we try to now add, like infectious disease, that was a little bit laughed at, the solar stuff, that was a little bit laughed at when we came out with it. We're trying to make sure we add these things if it's important to them, or make sure that if they do have impacts, we add it into these plans now versus later, because we don't know if FEMA's going to come out with something for solar storms in 2 years that says, well, I hope you have something in your hazard mitigation plan. And then if not, we have to scramble to add it in there or amend it, et cetera. So I definitely would try and encourage people to add, I don't want to make it a 6,000 page plan, but as much as they can, or at least certain things they're specifically worried about, put it in the plan, even if you're not sure what funding it may come from, because who knows, this is a dam grant. We weren't expecting to relate back to mitigation. It's mostly an environmental services thing and dam bureau thing, but it related back to mitigation for some reason. So I would always encourage them to add as much as they can for that. Colin, to your question, actually, yes, New Hampshire is very specific about having kind of our own individual community plans. And the feedback I've gotten from the communities is they want to keep it that way. But a lot of other states actually do it by county even, especially the bigger states that just can't. So a lot of times you see either a county level at a very large scale, or some of the really tiny not towns will collaborate, like Hertz locations, stuff like that. They'll collaborate with their neighboring community and they'll do one together. And you don't have to be a tiny little town to do that. And sometimes a lot of people do it just to help with the match and the cost for it. But if 3, 4, 5 surrounding towns said, hey, we all kind of have same problems that relate, we could all share in this together and in the actions and the costs, they could absolutely do what we call a multi-community plan. And we just don't see it happen, but it is an option. So if that's a discussion that they want to have, or you want to help them have, and say, hey, you know, if this river is causing flooding for everyone, or sometimes we even see if there's a problem, you know, upstream, it hurts someone downstream, and they're like, well, if they don't fix their bridge up here, it impacts us, and there's nothing we can do. I think they should probably try to work together on a plan or funding or something that they can help each other out with. So it's definitely an option. We just don't see it utilized in New Hampshire because everyone likes to have their own. Hopefully that addresses those.
I think some folks are doing that, and I know our at least the Dover, Rochester, and Somersworth public works departments all work together in, especially with COVID-19, and thinking about, do we collectively have enough salt for the roads? What happens if Somersworth public works department is out with COVID and no one can drive the plows? Like, do we have a plan to make sure those roads get covered? So there's kind of that level. I guess this would be the nuclear option, but I'm wondering if there'd be any chance FEMA would think about this and say, okay, with like high hazard dams, so, you know, all communities have to participate within the downstream possible impacts of that dam, in order to get funding to fix it in the future or shore up any possible damage. Obviously, that'd be a bit heavy-handed, and I'm sure that wouldn't go over well. But I don't know. So I don't have another specific question. That's just where my head is, and I at their general plans starting soon to kind of get communities thinking collectively. You know, like if there's an evacuation route, and one town has a culvert that is ready to blow the next time we get another Mother's Day storm, you know, I'd be interested in asking the communities that are on the other side of that culvert, how much would you be willing to chip in to make sure folks in your city or town can get out on this road when this culvert blows, or make sure it doesn't blow so your folks can get out. Anyway.
Yeah, we always encourage communities to invite surrounding communities to participate in these plan updates. It doesn't happen. I mean, everyone's super busy, everyone's understaffed, so I'm sure that doesn't help. But if you can, I always try to encourage that, because exactly like you said, Colin, a lot of times, especially ones that are really close by, are in the same geography, have very similar things happening to them. And they do share resources. If you have anyone from the fire department there, you'll constantly hear, oh yeah, we had a fire we addressed, a wildfire, but it was in 2 towns over, but they need us to do that. So does that count for us? And that would be a great instance to say, well, yeah, maybe you guys should really collaborate, because wildfire is a problem for your area, because you all need to pull from each other's resources. So absolutely. And we're really, that's one of those normalized things in New Hampshire, is we all borrow from one another, which is amazing. We think it's normal and we don't really talk about it together. So when we have these plans, we keep it separate. We don't realize that we're constantly borrowing from each other's resources to really make everyone's day-to-day work. So yeah, if you can try to get the communities to invite others, I would certainly do that, because I think that brings that to light a little better when you're like, oh yeah, we did work on that together. Or I guess if you did fix this culvert, now I'm in trouble. So yeah, I would certainly, that's the best I know. I could certainly bring it up to FEMA. I'm sure they're gonna have not usually what they say to me is, hey, you guys, the states do their own thing, and New Hampshire is pretty stubborn. And I think they would basically have to say, New Hampshire needs to come to us and say that that's what they want. And that's a fight for us to have. But they like to say, hey, you guys are doing your own thing, especially New Hampshire. So live for your die.
Perhaps going forward, there would be some way to incentivize that type of cooperation, and perhaps county-wide inventory sharing. And I wonder too, and you may not have an answer to this, is kind of a comment question, and for everyone on the meeting to think about, is let me just, excuse me, go back to my notes here. The functioning as a region. And I wondered, Kayla, you pointed out that very captivating dollar ratio in the beginning of your presentation. And I wonder too, if that dollar ratio would look even better in terms of, the far lower expenditure, the much more cost effectiveness of mitigation prevention versus response recovery. I wonder if that ratio would start to look even better as communities work together increasingly. If I don't know the answer to that, but I'm just mentioning it for us all to think about. And I understand what you pointed out, how it works with FEMA and what direction, but perhaps we can hope that going forward there would be some kind of incentives that would present themselves for that type of cooperative planning.
I don't know about incentives, but I would definitely think that would help that dollar value for sure. It's not everyone, but I know one of the big sticking points for getting funding for these grants is called a benefit cost analysis. You have to get a certain number that basically says you have to have so many historical occurrences and really show the damages are going to be worse, how expensive it's going to be. And sometimes it's fine and it works, but there are some cases where it is kind of a multi-community issue that I think if you're just looking at one portion of a river that's flooding just these roads, because it goes right to the town line, technically, for the grant for them, it doesn't look as bad. But if you were to say, yeah, but the problem actually goes 2 towns over, it keeps going. If you now look at those historical damages, that's even if it's the same 3 incidents, the damage number, the impact number is going to be much higher, and FEMA is going to be able to see it better to say, oh, okay. Because they, again, especially at a national level, they don't understand, they can't tell. So the way, yeah, if you're looking at it as just a community and you have to, for the grant reason, cut it off at the town lines, it might look awkward and they might not get, it might not look as bad as it is. But yeah, if there is a community that says, hey, it flows into 3 other communities and it's a bigger issue, I think that could certainly help that BCA ratio show how big of an impact it is. And it might even help, I mean, if I'm paying for rent by myself, that stinks. But if I have someone else paying it with me, it's less money. So hopefully it would be the same for the communities, that we're all in one big grant together. Maybe they would have more likelihood to get granted that and also be able to split that cost share. Again, it might not work for every community, but I certainly think that that's something underutilized, like you mentioned, absolutely. That should be looked at and discussed more. I think people just kind of get caught up in the time frame and the work it takes to put into it, and they're not sure how to divvy it up. But I would love to even have some sort of incentive to do that. But I think that could certainly be something in the future that would be helpful if we could get there.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Well, I would hope, it's going to sound really bad, I would hope that COVID and drought emphasize what you're talking about, Leslie. Drought is not Rochester specific. You know, when you look at the map, it's basically the whole, but potentially even larger, the whole southern part of New Hampshire. COVID is statewide. So hopefully we start thinking about this from current examples, COVID, drought. I'm sure there's others that you have come to me that represent what you're both talking about. This is, and you as well, Colin, this is not something specific to Rochester. This is something that impacts us statewide.
Awesome. I think there was a lot of good information there, and I'm really glad you guys are sharing. Do we have any other comments related to funding and maybe that mutual aid topic? Any other questions for Kayla or your fellow commissioners or municipal members? No? All right, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. We're a little bit over what our original agenda said, so I want to thank you guys all for joining us. And thank you again to Kayla and Heather for being willing to hop on the call and share your knowledge and just being willing to chat with us. Thank you so much.
Anytime. Happy to be here. Thanks for having us. And I'll send you, Stephanie, I'll send you the PowerPoint if anyone wants to take a further look. And then, yeah, reach out, call us, let us know what you need.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks, Steph.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day, all.